Hey guys, welcome back to another week of Sam's Scoops. This week we're looking at two really interesting stories. I know I say that every week, but this week I really mean it. The first is out of California, and it's who owns Silicon Valley? It's a question journalists out there had, and so they spent a year to investigate that. And the other is out of BuzzFeed. You know, BuzzFeed's come a long way since they just had the quizzes, and they have an investigative team now. And so this is a story that starts on net neutrality. So back when Obama was president, he set aside this rule that to protect the web from being opened, internet providers couldn't really, they had to treat all traffic to sites equally to kind of make sure, it was a fair place to be. But when Trump came, he wanted to, back in 2017, he wanted to repeal this. And so the FCC kind of set out a comment period. And so that's where this story starts. This woman was online and she was looking through the comments that people were posting on FCC about, pro or anti net neutrality. And she came across a familiar name. It was actually her mom. And she was like, well, my mom's not really into politics. And second of all, my mom is dead. Yes, her mother was dead. And so this investigation is called the Impersonators. Political operatives are faking voter outrage with millions of made-up comments to benefit the rich and powerful. And so it uncovered that 9.5 million comments had been stolen identities that, and it kind of found in this complexity of it was these two little known firms called MediaBridge and LCX Digital, and they're working on behalf of this big industry company, Broadway for America. And they allegedly misappropriated names and personal information as part of a bid to submit more than 1.5 million statements favorable to a cause, and that cause was anti-net neutrality. And further uncovering and further looking into it, they found that this isn't the only time that one of those companies which is an advertising agency that was hired, but this wasn't the only time that they were working on campaigns that had also impersonation allegations. So these companies are using different people posting on behalf of political operatives that they didn't even know about to kind of sway the public opinion one way or the other. And it's not as severe as, casting votes for someone, but if this is how the nation is taking a pulse on where people stand about a certain issue, you can see the problematic ways when you're, unfairly weighting the deck of cards at one favor based on impersonations that people have, bought. So that's just a little bit why this is concerning, and going into that a little bit more, not to be one way or another, but just looking at the facts here, they found 99% of the organic comments, the ones that were not tied to impersonations that they could see were replicated or, that they could somehow find were labeled as organic, favored maintaining net neutrality. And so you can see that this wasn't, both sides kind of weighing the deck. It was the people who were anti-net neutrality. And further appearing the comments, they found fictional characters weighed in. Senators were very vocal about one side, had comments associated with their name that were linking them to the other. And so it was very, very bizarre, and there was a massive dump of comments, and so it makes it hard for someone to kind of shift through things, and made it very hard for them to kind of look into more. I think this is a very complex story. I had a hard time reading it, so hopefully I'm explaining it kind of well, but you should read it and try to make sense of it yourself as well. But there was also, they found other campaigns that used the same data, so it'd be like the same person's address, same comments replicated in a different campaign for a different topic. And it's like, okay, well maybe, the same people commented and they're very vocal, but they kind of wrote the odds of being able to reach 99% of 100,000 people 1 year later, is also a year later, are very minuscule. Even if possible, the odds of convincing them all to submit yet another comment on a topic only a little bit related seem virtually null. So it's like impersonations. I've never heard of this problem. I don't know if I lived under a rock during this, but I've never heard this before, and it was kind of just crazy. Here it writes, I kind of touched on this earlier, but the rise of political impersonation threaten a core aspect of U.S. democracy. This is how they're looking at public opinion. The process is not the same as voting. I already kind of touched on all that a little bit. But if you're paying lobbyists to kind of impersonate people and your name, that, maybe you're not financially being impacted, but politically and policy-wise, you can be. And so that just a scary thought of where our democracy and where the powers of the internet can take us. So if you want to get a little scared, but also a little informed, take a look at this one. Happier and sunny places now. California. This one's out of NBC-based Investigative, but they actually paired up with a bunch of different organizations because, like I said, this was a year-long investigation into who owns Silicon Valley. And so they took on the enormous and very time-consuming task of looking at 500,000 records and examining every property record in Santa Clara County, which is where Silicon Valley is, where is all the tech companies and everyone. It's kind of been moving in recent years and becoming largely possible. The market value of the area is estimated at $1.5 trillion. And so it's a problem because it's pricing people out who were owners there. So the story opens, this is a broadcast piece, and this one opens on, a family who lives in an apartment complex, and all of a sudden it got sold and they didn't know who their landlord was anymore. And it was just registered to an LLC. And so the station kind of looks into it from there. So in their analysis of all these property records, they uncovered that the largest owner of Silicon Valley is, if I could do a drum roll, but I only have one hand, drum roll, is actually a university. It is Stanford University is the top one here. They're the largest owner. They have $19.75 billion. After them, it comes Apple and Google and a few other tech companies, and they have a whole list online if you're super interested in it. So those were the owners. I guess that was interesting, but I thought the more interesting and more impactful part of it all was that job growth is just happening so rapidly, but housing is not following it. So they're kind of blaming the big tech here, and they're saying they should have provided financing or some kind of plan to help build housing and infrastructure for these people. And they kind of compared this to Detroit during the auto boom, and Detroit went downhill and has way less people than they have now. And so in one of these counties, I'm not sure if it was Santa Clara County, but somewhere around in California, they said they actually took measures to constrain job growth. With here in South Carolina, you would never hear, job growth, but they were getting too much because they didn't have enough housing. And so it was pricing people out of the home, so they couldn't be living where they wanted to work in large commutes, and just a huge problem. So there's one quote here that was very interesting from the San Jose mayor. And he says, "It's really become a tale of two valleys. And we know that of all the prosperity we see in this region, it's the envy of the rest of the country," right? You hear Silicon Valley. "But we have thousands and thousands of families who are struggling and falling further behind and mainly being pushed out. So we're really at a crossroads. How do you support big tech and innovation and job growth while also making sure that everyone can have an affordable life and they are not having to commute hours and hours just to have a job?" So that one's interesting. It's a multi-part series. I'll post both of the links below as always. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I will see you again next week. Have a great week.